How's it going, folks? Tech Tard Ted, Tuesday, September 7th. Well, I would like to give a shout out to all my Ukrainian experts out there. I just recently had somebody tell me, look, it's a burnt Russian tank. Okay, how do you know it's a burnt Russian tank? Well, it says right here in the article that it's a T-62. It says in the article, does it? Okay. Ukraine fields T-62s. How do you know it's not a Ukrainian team? Well, the article says. I also read a article that said a pensioner with a rifle shot down an Su-35 fighter jet. And of course, the picture has him with a fucking 12-gauge shotgun. So, I don't put a whole lot of faith in pictures and stories in the news anymore. But you're an expert. You're absolutely an expert. You know what it is. You know that's what it's got to be. It's got to be a Russian tank. It's not like the Ukrainian army uses T-62s. Well, this other one, this is a T-72. Yeah, just like the T-72s that Poland gave Ukraine, just like the T-72s that are laying all over Kherson, bloated up in various states of disrepair. Now, the Russians are putting T-90s out there. The T-90 is definitely a Russian tank. The Ukrainians don't have any of that in their stockpiles. So, show me a picture of a bloated up T-90 and, well, absolutely, you have a shot up Russian tank. But all these armored personnel carriers, these M113s and their variants, those aren't Russian. Those aren't Russian. Those are NATO or American stuff that we gifted Zelensky so he can play Fuhrer. And I find it really interesting that folks who don't know one tank from another, they can't tell me how I can identify a T-62 versus a T-54, 55 series with the spacing in the road wheels, the bore evacuator, where it is, and what's a bore evacuator? That you're going to sit there and tell me definitively that a rusted piece of metal that was once a tank is definitively belongs to one country or another when there are no markings because it has been burnt. I'm going to question you somewhat. Now, if you can tell me the different variants of the T-62s, the Vs, the VBs, and the other variants, because you know what you're looking for, then I'll listen to you. But if you just, well, they said it's a Russian tank. Oh, okay. I can tell you that a 113 is a Russian armored personnel carrier. That doesn't mean it's true. And the press has been doing a lot of this. A whole lot of this. I'll give you several examples. Recently, an article, I think it was in the Daily Mail, I can't remember. Article about a pensioner shooting down a Russian Su-35 fighter jet with his rifle. And the picture there, and here's an old guy with a 12-gauge shotgun. First of all, a shotgun is not a rifle. Second of all, I don't believe that a shotgun has the range to shoot a fighter jet in the sky. Third of all, even if it was a rifle, chances are you're not going to be able to get that 1 in 35 million shot to take a fighter jet out of the sky with a bolt action rifle. Ain't gonna happen. We can go to the earlier days. There was a friendly fire incident in Kiev in the first 48 hours of the war where Ukrainian soldiers got trigger happy and shot up a bunch of other Ukrainian soldiers wearing Ukrainian uniforms in a Ukrainian truck. And the UK Daily Mail identified them as Russian soldiers. They weren't. They were Ukrainians. So, do you guys know the difference in a Ukrainian uniform versus a Russian uniform? Do you honestly? Do you know what the Ukrainians are using to identify themselves to each other? Well, I'll tell you right now. They're wearing armbands, yellow, blue, or green. Usually one about bicep high. The Russians have their own distinct digital flora uniform. Oh, by the way, the Ukrainians are wearing something that's kind of like the old ACU pattern. It's a digital. It's kind of all washed out and faded, not as blue. That's their standard uniform. They also wear multicam. And a hodgepodge of helmets. Just all sorts of helmets. The Russians, digital flora. They also wear ATAS camo. And they also wear multicam. How do they identify each other? Well, usually on opposing bicep and thigh, they have either a red or a white armband, usually just a piece of rudimentary cloth. Did you know that? Did you know that? Honestly, did you know that? Because a lot of you so-called experts don't really seem to know shit about what you're talking about. Do you know that the Ukrainians have a lot of expired Russian food packs in their inventory? Well, probably not anymore. They probably all went through all those combat rations. That's well known. You guys know what a cornet is? Do you know what a BMPT is? Do you know how to identify it? Do you know what the difference between a BMPT and a BMP is? Do you know what a Ukrainian BMP looks like versus a Russian BMP? Do you know what a BTR-60 is? Do you know what a Russian BTR-60 looks like compared to a Ukrainian BTR-60? Do you know what a BRDM-2 is? What's the difference between a Ukrainian BRDM-2 and a Russian BRDM-2? Same vehicles. If they're burnt, I can't tell you. If they have their markings intact, I can probably tell you. If they have the camo pattern that the Ukrainians use, I can tell you. But what I'm trying to explain, folks, is a lot of you folks are putting pictures out there and you're saying something is this based on an erroneous news article, and you're acting like you're an expert. And I'm not an expert. There are things I don't know. But I do know what I do know. And I do know that you guys, a lot of y'all will be taken for a ride and fooled. You're being told something is what it is. Let's face it, guys. You can show me a picture of a dog, tell me it's a cat. It doesn't mean it's so. You can send me a picture of a burnout Ukrainian vehicle and tell me it's Russian. That doesn't mean it's so. On the same flip side, you can show me a picture of a Russian vehicle and say it's Ukrainian. A great example of this is early on, there were a group of Ukrainian soldiers, I think it were territorial troops, that found a BMP, a Russian one, that had been disabled. It got stuck in the mud in the spring. And they were all posing and hanging out and taking pictures. And you see a couple of tanks come rolling up. And they get point blank range and they fire on these guys. Kill them. Loaded them up. Right? And on social media, there was all these postings. And I couldn't believe it that this was friendly fire. This was friendly fire. Friendly fire. Absolutely. Ukrainians killed their own folks. Fratricide. Right? The only problem was, once you looked at the video, you could plainly see the Russian vehicle identification marks on these vehicles as they rolled up, and the Ukrainians were just totally unaware, that it's a it's a Soviet tank. It's got to be one of ours. They wouldn't dare be the Moscows, the orcs, as they call them. The orcs wouldn't dare come up here. No, well, the orcs just lit your whole ass up. So if it's tough for soldiers engaged in combat not to be able to tell if a tank is theirs or the bad guys, what makes you the expert? Honestly, those guys' lives depended on it, and they chose poorly. They trusted something they didn't need to trust. But you, sitting there in your armchair, looking on your phone, gazing on the internet, who can't tell me the differences in basic military equipment, probably can't tell me the difference between a BMP and a BMD, or who uses them. You're going to take what people tell you from a newspaper who've probably never seen combat, never studied anything about the zone, the vehicles, the equipment. You're going to tell me definitively that you know what you're talking about based on this article. You don't. You don't. You don't. And you don't research. You're not interested in researching. You're just interested in regurgitating what is going to substantiate your preconceived notion, whatever that notion might be. And that ain't the way this works, folks. You can lie all you want, it don't make it so. I don't subscribe to the Russian opinion that they weren't a little concerned during the last two offenses. Anytime somebody comes at me and wants to put a hurt on me, I might know what's going on, but I'm going to be concerned. I'm going to be worried that I might misstep. It's all a chess game. I also don't subscribe to the great sweeping gains that are being reported in the press. I can read a map. And when you have the Western sources maps that are showing things from the Ukrainian perspective, and you show me the Russian maps that the Russians are putting out, showing their situation, and there's not enough difference between the two to really argue a whole lot about. I mean, it's just little spots here and there. The Russians have this. They're not any towns of any significance. I can read a map. I can interpret a map. And if you're not taking ground, you're losing ground. Ukrainians aren't taking much ground. The Russians are steadily taking ground, but they've actually lost a couple of settlements. But then again, you get to looking at some of these settlements they lost, and they really didn't lose them. It was a publicity stunt, a propaganda show. And Zelensky's getting these folks killed for propaganda. Like the fellows that went and hoisted the flag on Snake Island. They got artillery rounds. At least 2 of them died for a publicity stunt. A publicity stunt. Yes, my son died in the Great War against the Russians, putting up a flag because Zelensky needed the press. Man, not particularly a good look, is it? I wouldn't say so. Well, folks, I want you to sit down and study and learn about what you're talking about. And it's really frustrating to see people who are pretty educated, pretty much understand what's going on. It's frustrating to see them fall time and time and time again for the same lies and the same lies. And let's be 100% honest. Tomorrow, the Ukrainians might launch a fabulous offensive and take Kherson. Anything's possible. But I don't think it's going to happen. But if it does, I'll be the first to tell you, yeah, boy, the Russians screwed the pooch. But what I'm telling you right now is the Ukrainians are screwing the pooch. The Ukrainians are losing irreplaceable equipment. They're losing lives that they can't replace. And, a reminder, I mentioned it probably yesterday. The Ukrainians are getting ready to conscript women. Nazi Germany did not conscript women. Even as bad as it got for them at the end of World War II, they never conscripted women. It is that bad that the Ukrainians are preparing to conscript women. Something you guys need to think about. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.